Have you ever said something in a conversation and watched it get completely ignored? Then, 5 minutes later, someone else says almost the exact same thing, and suddenly everyone is listening. Same idea, same facts. Sometimes not even a better idea. So what changed? The delivery. Because being intelligent isn't enough to make people listen to you. You can have the best idea in the room and still get talked over. You can know exactly what you're talking about and still sound uncertain. And you can say something completely reasonable only to watch the conversation move on without you. The frustrating part is that you may not even realize you're doing it. But there are a few communication habits that quietly change how people perceive your confidence, your judgment, and even your credibility. And the good news? None of them require you to become louder, more aggressive, or more extroverted. They're skills. And once you notice them, you can start changing them immediately. Here are 5 communication habits that make people actually listen to you. Habit 1. Stop apologizing for your own opinion. Listen closely to how people phrase their ideas. You'll hear things like, "I think maybe we could try this," or "I don't know, but I feel like this might work," or "This could be completely wrong, but now compare that with, here's what I think we should do," or "This is the problem, and here's how we fix it." Same person, same intelligence, same idea. But the second version carries more weight. And here's the important distinction. There's nothing wrong with saying, "I think," when you're genuinely uncertain. The problem is when you use uncertainty language every time you speak, even when you actually know what you mean, because every unnecessary hedge adds a little distance between you and your own opinion. You're basically saying, "Here's my idea, but please don't judge me too harshly for having it." You don't need that apology. If you believe something, say it clearly. Instead of, "I think we should probably move the deadline," try, "We need to move the deadline. Here's why." Instead of, "I feel like this strategy could work," try, "This strategy gives us the best chance of getting there." Notice what changed. You didn't become arrogant, you became clear. And clarity is one of the fastest ways to make your words feel more credible. Habit 2. Don't let someone else's reaction control your response. This one is harder, because you can control your words, but what happens when someone pushes back? Someone criticizes your idea, someone interrupts you, someone speaks to you disrespectfully, and suddenly you feel your body tense up, your voice changes, you start defending yourself, you talk faster, you explain more, and before you know it, you're no longer responding to the conversation, you're reacting to the emotion. That's where people lose control. The goal isn't to become emotionless, it's to create a small gap between what happens to you and what you do next. Think about a blade of grass. A heavy object lands on it and it bends, but it doesn't stay broken. It absorbs the impact and returns to its position. Now think about a dry twig. The same pressure hits it and it snaps. That's the difference between being responsive and being reactive. Someone says something that gets under your skin. You don't have to immediately prove them wrong. You don't have to defend every detail. You don't have to match their energy. Sometimes the most powerful response is simply, "Let me think about that for a second," or "I understand your point, here's where I disagree," or even just a pause. Because when you can stay calm while someone else is emotional, something interesting happens. You become the stable person in the conversation, and people naturally pay attention to the person who seems in control of themselves. Habit 3. Say less, but make every word count. Here's something most people get backwards. They think talking more makes them sound more knowledgeable. Usually it does the opposite. The people who have the most influence in a room aren't necessarily the people who talk the most. They're the people whose words actually matter when they speak. Imagine someone asks, "Why did the project miss the deadline?" One person says, "Yeah, so basically there were a few different things happening and we were trying to get everything done. But then this issue came up and we thought we'd be able to catch up, but obviously that didn't happen." Another person says, "We underestimated the workload. Here's what we're changing next time." Which one sounds more in control? The second one. Not because they said more, because they knew when to stop. Before you speak, ask yourself, what is the one thing I actually need to communicate here? If you know the answer, say it, then stop. You don't need to fill every silence. You don't need to immediately explain every possible objection. And you definitely don't need to keep talking just because the other person hasn't responded yet. Sometimes silence isn't awkward, it's powerful. When your words become more intentional, people start paying closer attention to them because they know you're not going to bury the important point under 10 minutes of unnecessary explanation. And that brings us to a communication skill that's even more powerful than having the right answer. Habit 4. Ask the question nobody else is asking. You don't always need to be the smartest person in the room. Sometimes you just need to ask the question that makes everyone else think, because great communicators aren't always the people with the most answers. They're often the people who know which question matters. Think about a complicated problem. It's like a tangled knot of cables. You could pull on everything at once and make the mess worse. Or you could find one strand and follow it carefully until you discover the loop that's holding everything together. A great question does exactly that. It finds the strand that matters. So instead of asking, "What's the problem?" try, "What's the one thing preventing us from moving forward?" Instead of, "How's everything going?" ask, "What's the biggest blocker right now?" Instead of, "Can we fix this?" ask, "What would need to change so this doesn't happen again?" Look at the difference. The first question invites a general answer. The second forces people towards something specific, and that's the secret. Good questions don't just collect information, they move conversations forward. The next time you're in a meeting, disagreement, or difficult conversation, don't feel pressured to have the perfect answer. Instead, ask yourself, what question would make this conversation more useful? That question alone can completely change the direction of the room. Habit 5. Say the hard thing once, then stop talking. This might be the hardest habit of all, because when we're uncomfortable, we tend to explain. We say something difficult, then immediately soften it, then clarify it, then explain what we meant, then give 3 reasons why we said it. And eventually, the original message disappears underneath all the extra words. Why? Because we're not really communicating anymore. We're trying to make ourselves feel safer. Imagine you're landing a plane. You've already lined up with the runway. Everything is ready, but instead of landing, you pull back up and circle around again. Then you come back. Then you circle again. Eventually, everyone starts wondering, are we actually going to land this thing? That's what over-explaining feels like. You make your point, then you keep talking because the silence makes you uncomfortable. But that silence might actually be the moment your message is landing. So say the difficult thing clearly, then give it space. For example, instead of, "I don't mean this in a bad way, and obviously I understand where you're coming from, and maybe I'm looking at this differently, but I just feel like perhaps we should consider," say, "I don't agree with that approach. Here's why." Then stop. Let the other person respond. You don't have to immediately rescue your own statement. And this applies to your body language too. When you say something important, don't suddenly shrink. Don't start fidgeting with your phone. Don't look around the room. Don't lower your voice until your sentence disappears. Stay still, breathe, make eye contact, and let your words stand on their own. Because confidence isn't always about speaking louder. Sometimes it's simply being comfortable enough not to keep talking. So, what do all 5 habits have in common? Look at them together. Stop apologizing for your opinions. Don't let emotions choose your response. Say less, but make your words count. Ask questions that move the conversation forward. And when you finally say the difficult thing, stop talking. Notice what's missing from all 5. You don't have to dominate the room. You don't have to become the loudest person. You don't have to pretend you're confident when you're not. And you don't need to have an answer for everything. You simply need to become more intentional about how you communicate. So don't try to master all 5 at once. For the next 7 days, pick just one. Maybe it's removing unnecessary hedging from your sentences. Maybe it's learning to pause before reacting. Maybe it's saying your point in half as many words. Maybe it's asking better questions. Or maybe it's learning to say something difficult and letting the silence happen afterward. Because the goal isn't to become someone who talks more. It's to become someone whose words carry more weight when they do speak. And eventually, you'll notice the difference. People won't just hear you, they'll start waiting to hear what you say next.